I had a lot of one-on-one FaceTime with my teachers when I was in grade school. One particular memory stings really still. Having a conference with my mother, Mrs. Petraka, my second grade teacher, said, "You know, David's really doing great considering how little God gave him." Yeah. Well, it was tough, and things didn't get a lot better for me going up through lower school. And I got called up once to the principal's office to see Mr. Nash, who was also my English teacher. And he wanted to talk to me about how short and slim my end-of-term project was. And I argued with him. I said, "You know, Mr. Nash, didn't you teach us that quality is so much more important than quantity?" And he was a little bit of a hothead, and he said, "Yeah, David, I did, but don't be ridiculous. You only wrote 9 words." Well, to be honest, at that time, getting 9 words was kind of an accomplishment for me. I was doing pretty well, I thought. I just hadn't developed any core competencies at all going through school, and not much self-confidence. Well, tragically, my dad died before I finished high school, and my mom moved us out east. She got a job teaching at Milton Academy, which is a very exclusive Eastern prep school. And the school was a really good break for me. My classmates were the children of the captains of politics and industry, so I was going to school with the Kennedys and the Lodges and the Cabots and whatnot. And Milton was a school that had a policy where every student would play a sport every season. So I played 3 sports, and that was great. I really learned to love sport a lot. And my senior year, I got to run in the state track meet in the high hurdles. Well, Milton had a cinder track. I think they had cinders because they thought it built character. I'm not sure. But I had developed one core competency running track, and that was I learned how to dig the cinders out of my knees. The fact of the matter is, I never finished a track meet standing up. I fell every single race, and I was a tragically bad hurdler. I mean, I was really bad, and hurdling was kind of representative of my life up until that time. I fell all the time, and I never finished anything. Well, as sell-by dates do, mine came up to date, and Milton Academy decided it was time for me to graduate. And I had the dubious honor of being the only student in my graduating class to not get accepted to college. So that was rough, especially ironic considering who my parents were. My mother was a published textbook author of a university calculus tome, and my father was a double PhD nuclear physicist on the National Energy Commission. So going to college was kind of expected, and not going was not one of the options. So my mom, she was ready to move on. She'd had enough of babysitting, and she said, "You know, honey, I love you, but you got to find a place to live and get a job because you're out." Well, so I did. I got a room in a kind of slummy area of Mattapan for $20 a week, and very nearby was the Milton Hill Restaurant, which was conveniently located in the first floor of a senior living center, and I got my first restaurant job there. Well, on a Sunday, shortly after I'd started working there, a former English teacher of mine from Milton came in with his wife and to have lunch with his mother, who was a resident in the senior living center. And during lunch, she collapsed in a chair, just like this. And she's out, and miraculously, I don't know why, maybe old people in our society are just invisible, but no one noticed that she was literally dying in her chair, except for me. So without consulting anybody or being instructed to do so, I snapped into action, and I grabbed Mrs. Fernald out of the chair, and I put her on the floor, and I looked, listened, and felt to see if she had any signs of life, and I determined that, in fact, she had a pulse, but that she wasn't breathing. And I loosened her collar, and I gave her rescue breaths with mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And I saved Mrs. Fernald's life. So as you can imagine, that was a pretty big deal for me. Young David saved somebody's life, hero of the day. What I didn't immediately realize was that the moment that I saved Mrs. Fernald's life, she actually saved mine. You see, up until that time of my life, I had never done anything important competently, capably, or successfully. And in that one moment, somehow it was a trigger for me, and I started to be able to visualize myself as being capable. And things really started to change pretty quickly after that. The owner of the restaurant, Mr. Mazeka, invited me to go into his kitchen, and I got my first cooking job, working for my first chef. Now, Chef Wilson was an enormous Southern black man. I mean, well over 400 pounds. And he had a way about him that I still try to emulate today. He would give me just enough direction, set me loose to do a task so that I could learn how to do it myself. And I started to develop some confidence and feel pretty good about myself. Well, with that confidence, I really started to feel good. I got my legs in the kitchen and all that. And so you would think that, after that, it was all instant success, puppy dogs and ice cream, and I was off like a rocket, right? Well, not so fast. I remember one particular time when Chef Wilson had tasked me with shucking a bunch of corn. It was a Southern-themed restaurant. We used a lot of corn. And he had this method. You would hold the ear of corn in one hand and take a boning knife and pull down in one clean stroke. And if you did it right, you would get the husk and the silk in one clean pull. If you did it wrong, you would just about lop off the end of your finger, which is what I did. Well, he was a good mentor, so he was right there with the lemon and the salt, squeezing it on the wound to stop the bleeding, wrapped my hand up and sent me off to the emergency room. Well, when I returned, as he so often did when I messed up, he gave me a big bear hug, tell me it was all right. Now, he was, you can't get a hug like that from a normal-sized man. I mean, he's a 400-pound black guy, and he's got me. I was afraid I was going to suffocate right there. But we soldiered on, and I did develop a lot more confidence, and with that came some motivation. With the motivation, I decided to enroll in junior college, where, shockingly, I did really well. And then I reapplied to the university that had rejected me from high school. And despite my second grade teacher's estimation that I had been given short shrift by God, I graduated from Cornell University in 3 years in the top quarter of my class. Well, things started to accelerate again. And at age 25, I opened my first restaurant, and then I opened 11 more. And I've had a moderately successful career as a chef and restaurateur. It's gone all right. Well, it turns out that for me, like for a lot of young people, my problem wasn't being stupid. It wasn't just not having any natural capability. What really had held me back for so long was a debilitating lack of self-confidence. Up until the time I saved Mrs. Fernald's life, I had never been able to visualize myself doing something independently, capably, and successfully. That happened, it was a trigger, and I was off like a rocket. Well, I've had a lot of experience with young people over the years. So in addition to having 6 children of my own, I've had countless young people walk through my kitchen door to be dishwashers or cooks, and I've taught, tons of young people how to surf in my surf camps. And I've been a really active mentor in the high school vocational programs and the culinary programs. And I'll tell you firsthand, I've seen a lot of floundering young people struggling, trying to find their way, just, directionless. And I've made a common observation, it's a repeated, durable observation. How often these lost young people have turned their lives around almost immediately after finding that they're able to do something independently, capably, and successfully. It's like they find a superpower. Boom, and off they go. Well, so I guess you would think that no matter where that area is, that would naturally inform the direction of the rest of their lives and their career. So, for me, I saved Mrs. Fernald. It was sort of medical. Maybe I should have been an EMT or a nurse or a doctor. Or for those kids that I taught how to bone chickens, they get so excited. They get competitive with each other, and they develop all this confidence, and they're racing each other. Who can bone a chicken the fastest and do the best? Well, they should all be butchers. And those kids who pop up for the first time on a surfboard and they find their balance, they're going to be pro surfers, right? Or I've got a son that really was kind of lost and directionless until he discovered that his superpower was working with computer hardware. And he's really a genius at it. So, of course, he's going to be a computer scientist, right? Or maybe most amusingly, my oldest son, who really did develop a superpower at push-ups. He got into the Coast Guard, and he could do more push-ups than anybody at his unit when he was going to Coast Guard school in Cape May. So he should be a natural, professional push-upper, right? Because that's a thing. Well, I don't actually think that's how it works. I think that getting this capability and this superpower in your brain is much more like getting a liberal arts college education in college. It's not about the task that you become capable and competent at. It's how mastering that task allows you to visualize yourself. It's about developing self-confidence. It's about believing in yourself. So you might think that for me, if I hadn't saved Mrs. Fernald, there never would have been a David's restaurant. And I don't know, I did save Mrs. Fernald, so we'll never really know that. But what I've come to believe after thinking about it is that inside everybody, there's a capable, happy, successful person just waiting to find their trigger to get out. And I don't think that at the end of the day, you need to save someone else's life to save your own. I think you can find that trigger, that success, and that happiness with something as really simple as being really good at doing push-ups, or perhaps just learning how to shuck an ear of corn without chopping off the end of your thumb. Thank you very much.